Hey, what's up everybody, it's S. So my channel is still pretty small, so I'm able to answer, most comments directly if I'm not super busy or, just being lazy. But I did want to touch on a couple of comments because some comments have been asked, multiple times, and some of y'all are actually kind of funny. Like this comment here. October 19X says, in all this time, I thought you was a black guy. I ended up watching this short like 3 times to see, what I did that was white or black or whatever. And I honestly didn't see anything different than I normally do, except that I got a pellet grill. So I'm not sure if getting a pellet grill made me white, but that's not my only grill. I do have a Weber Smoky Mountain, and I also have a Weber 26-inch in case you're wondering. But to be fair, I have gotten that comment like 4 to 5 times over the last year or so. So to put that issue to bed, I'm gonna go ahead and respond to all the comments.
Drum roll, please.
I'm not white, and I'm not black either.
Got him!
So Electric Games 5415, and I said he, I'm assuming that's a guy because the metrics say 99% of you guys are guys, but in the event that you're a woman, apologies. This person says, it's a nice collection, but hardly epic. He said, it's nice to see that someone is more focused on quality over quantity. And even though he's not a fan of Glocks and would never own one, he still thinks they're a quality firearm. And he'd take 1 Glock over 2 Tauruses any day, just like I would. Now, I thought I made it clear in that video, but maybe I didn't. The kind of point of showing, my epic collection is that it wasn't epic at all. It's not a $30,000 collection. I think YouTube obviously has skewed, the perception of most people. The average person, doesn't have that kind of money tied up in just one hobby. Now, I was just trying to show, what I have, because I think that's more realistic, for most people. Or if I'm being brutally honest, I'm probably just a hater.
I don't like that shit. For sure, bro. I don't like that shit.
So now I've gotten this question multiple times, and it even had my brain in a blender when I first got this 43X. So BB's Cat 2020 says, why did I leave this plate on? When I first got this 43X, I just bought a plate because I assumed it needed one. And then I saw a comment when I posted the video, someone said I didn't. So I took it off. I felt so good about myself. And then I went back and saw another comment that I did need one. So now these folks were straight arguing in the comments, and I was just sitting back eating popcorn, reading them all. It was actually pretty funny. But I was kind of confused at that point. So I decided to look into it a little more. And at that point, I realized that the confusion was in the actual footprint. Now the Glock 43X has a footprint that's very similar to the RMSC footprint, but because Glock is Glock and they like to make adding optics difficult, they added 2 nubs to the back, or I'm not sure what the nubs are called. So there's basically 4 nubs on the Glock 43X MOS, but the optic only has a cutout for 2 in the front. So if you put the 407K on, it will screw in, but it'll be tilted, so it won't be level. Now I have seen videos where people, grind these down, but to me, it's not that serious. I just say get a plate. Now I will say though that I think the new 43Xs that came out, they came out without the nubs in the back, so you won't need a plate, but I'm not sure if that was just like, a special run or if that's gonna be the norm going forward. But to settle it, this 43X needs a plate for the optic to sit flush. And Dash over at Steel Drum Smokers Barbecue says, who are you and what have you done with S. That he said it's not enough FDE on this rifle that I just built, and I 1000% agree. I probably should have did a little bit more, but I was trying to tone it back a little bit. And then he also says that he's curious to see if this magnifier gets in the way of the charging handle. I don't have much clearance at the moment. I might be able to move this up a little bit. I still need to kind of tighten everything down. Everything's kind of just on here for show at the moment. But when I go to the range, if I notice it, be bumping into the magnifier, I'm gonna go ahead and move it up a little bit. But for now, I think it'll be fine. Maybe if I had some gloves on, might run into issues. But since I live in Texas, it's only hot or less hot, so I doubt I'll need them, but I'll be sure to report back if this gets in the way. Now, William Balling 8639, did I hear correctly when you said you took a stock off your lower to swap it with the brace? You might want to double check that because I think that's illegal. You can go from a brace to a stock and make the barrel longer, but if the lower receiver's serial number is registered as a rifle, he says, I don't think you can convert it to a pistol unless you SBR it. It could be wrong. Now, I went down this rabbit hole, when I first got this lower, so I'm no expert, so take all of this with a grain of salt, but it comes down to the manufacturer and how it's designated on the 4473. So since this lower was classified as other, I could go ahead and put the brace as well as the short barrel on it. Now, if this would have been classified as a rifle, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have to file paperwork, etc. Now, again, I'm no expert, so take all of that with a grain of salt. I don't want you to end up in jail behind something I said, but that's my understanding. If the lure was classified as other, it's not designated as a rifle, a shotgun, a pistol, or anything. It's essentially other. And then once you put the barrel on and the brace, that makes it now a pistol. Now, if I wanted to file some paperwork to get an SBR, I could do that, but I don't think I'm gonna pay 200 bucks for that right now. For the main reason is I don't mind the 200 bucks, but I don't feel like dealing with the hassle of getting this thing stamped. My understanding is that if you get something, SBR'd or registered, you have to actually go somewhere, get it stamped. I don't wanna deal with that, so I'm gonna go ahead, leave it in this configuration right here, and hope that I don't get locked up. All right, Beast Mode 939 says, he's not gonna lie. He says, I'm definitely the first person that he's seen with 3 different versions of the same gun. He's talking about my Glock 19s. It's usually 2 of them, never the same 3. He's laughing. He says, not including, Ben Stoker, which, if you're not a fan of his channel, I've seen a few videos. I'm not the biggest fan, but, I have found some of his content pretty interesting. He says, just like you, I've watched a bunch of gun videos and a lot of fun collection videos. I don't think I will ever love a gun that much. So I actually agree, and I actually got rid of one of my Glock 19s, and I actually didn't have 3 of the same technically. I have one Glock 19 that's just a regular base Gen 4. I have a Glock 19X, which I believe is right here. So the 19X has a longer grip, so it's more like a 45 than the actual 19. And then I had a Glock 19 MOS, which that's the one I actually got rid of a couple of weeks ago to finish out my latest rifle build. Now, I'm probably gonna stand pat for a while with Glocks. That is until they come out with the Glock 26, which is gonna be the longer grip, and then the Glock 26 slide. I know the Glock store, I think, has a frame, but I'm not really into aftermarket frames. So I'm gonna go ahead and hold out to see if Glock ever comes out with the Glock 26X. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. If you have any questions or whatever, drop me a comment, and I might do another one of these videos if I get a couple of the same comments, or if you're into this sort of thing. As always, thanks for watching. Drop me a like if you haven't already done so on your way out, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.